Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm here today with Josh Chin. Josh, welcome to the pod.
Thanks, James. Thank you. Long overdue. I'm happy to be here.
It is. Josh and I are friends. Well, very good friends. I'm going to say that. You might not agree, but we were having lunch in Sydney recently, and for some bizarre reason, you're kind of the perfect guest to have on the pod, and I've never thought to invite you. So it's happening.
I know. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So Josh is CEO and founder of Chronos Agency, which is a lifecycle marketing agency helping direct-to-consumer brands scale profits with email, SMS, and mobile push marketing. Josh lives in Singapore, which is where he's based and where Chronos started. Chronos now has location in Sydney, Australia as well. So congratulations on your growth, mate. You guys are smashing it.
Yeah, 100%. And we started out actually in the US, of all places, land of opportunity and land of e-commerce. And since day one, it's been e-commerce centric. We were early partners of a platform called Klaviyo. They're sort of like the MailChimp for e-commerce. If you're not in the kind of Shopify e-commerce ecosystem, you may not know of Klaviyo. And we've grown since then, and the team now kind of spans across, I believe, over 12 countries or so, 70, 80 over of us. And we work with clients primarily out of the US and Australia. And a small percentage of our clients are based in Europe and Asia.
That's fine, mate. Can we just talk about lifecycle marketing, just in terms of just to define that and kind of what it means for marketers out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a relatively broad term that describes the process that a business goes through to engage customers at every stage of their journey with a business. So hence the entirety of a customer's life cycle, from the kind of initial awareness standpoint till post-purchase interactions, and ultimately sunset and churn. And the goal here is to deliver the right message to the right person at the right time. And we do that with email and SMS, push, direct mail as well. And
as in physical mail, or
as in physical postcards. Yeah,
love that.
The whole idea is identify these sticking points that a consumer faces before ending at the final kind of destination, which is a purchase with a business. And there's a kind of slew of stages that one might go through before making a purchase, as well as what happens after that initial purchase. So when we look at success with lifecycle marketing, we're looking at the increase in revenue as a result of the channels that we're kind of operating on, but also the retention metrics, LTV, and growth of customer relationships as a result.
Yeah.
So that becomes really exciting, because all of that means the business becomes way more profitable. Ads become way easier to run and way more sustainable, because for every dollar that you're spending on ads, we're making way more on the back end with email and SMS. And it becomes a much more sustainable engine to grow.
Yeah, I remember I was at a conference many years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago now, in Sydney, and one of Google's senior, it wasn't someone from the Sydney office, they're actually from the Singaporean office, and they kind of had a question, which was which advertiser can afford to spend the most per click in Google. And there was a room of quite a lot of marketers and a lot of senior marketers, and no one got it right. And essentially the response was, it's the business that can afford, to maximize the lifetime value of that particular click.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which has a lot of resonance. And I suspect, obviously all businesses out there at varying levels should be looking at a degree of lifecycle marketing, but it feels that the nature of e-commerce is that it just does feel such a nice fit, right? Where you kind of
Yep.
got bringing someone in on one purchase, and not all ecom, but most ecom businesses are going to have repeat purchases as part of
100%.
that funnel, right?
And even with products that you think are kind of one and done, you buy it once and that's it. You'd be surprised at how many more subsequent purchases can be made with the right positioning, the right targeting, and in combination, the right strategy as a business.
Yeah.
A good example of that is a very prominent Shopify brand called the Udi out in Australia.
Yeah.
They sell these oversized hoodie blankets, wearable blankets. Great for cold weather. Could not imagine myself using one in Singapore. It's hot and humid all year long.
Pretty small market, I would have thought, in Singapore for
Very
hoodie.
tiny. But they've crushed it. And they've crushed it not just from a point of view of acquiring new customers over and over again, like singles one-time purchases, but also repeat purchases. And that's where we came in with emails, and the result completely surprised me. Right? We, in the first 90 days, we fixed a lot of things that needed to be fixed pre-purchase. Right? We tripled cart recovery rates and dropped unsubscribe rates by a good amount, like 57%, if I recall. But what shocked me was how many repurchases were happening on the back end. And that's a factor of both how the business was positioned and what the messaging was post-purchase, which was, it's a gift. If you like this, your friends and family will love this as well. And if you go into your website, their most prominent featured products often comes in bundles. So that's a big reason, kind of why that works out. But at the same time, there's also the other side of the coin, right? With LTV, and this is the big trap where a lot of the larger publicly listed D2C brands in the US have faced, that LTV play, right? But LTV only manifests and comes in 5 years down the road. And that's not going to happen. A great example of that is Casper. Obviously, I don't fully understand the details and kind of nooks and crannies behind it, but I would imagine that they've overspent on CPA, with the intention of kind of eventually recouping that money back with LTV down the road. But how many mattresses can you really purchase in a 3-year time horizon, 5-year time horizon? I've had my mattress for years. So the right measure there to look at would be 12-month LTV, 6-month LTV, and 24-month LTV, to give you a truer sense of what that payback period looks like and how sustainable the business is.
Is it the kind of work that you're doing with your prospective clients and your clients? That's kind of the first starting point, or putting a strategy together is to kind of work backwards from those numbers, or like how do you approach it?
Ideally, yes, but in reality, in most cases, what ends up happening in the first 90 days and therefore the initial conversation that we have with brands, it's not that even. It's often identifying the lowest hanging fruits within kind of the fundamentals of email and lifecycle / retention marketing on its own. So that means figuring out where the average click rates lie right now with campaigns, where the average click rates lie right now with the automations, and is it functioning at its full potential? For example, a brand might come in thinking that, all right, I want to improve my retention rates and LTV by 50% over the next 1 year. Like, okay, great. That's aggressive, but okay. What are your click rates right now? What's your engagement rate? And what's your, are people even responding well to your current efforts? And most often it's a no, right? And there are certain benchmarks that we can kind of get to online. Klaviyo publishes a quarterly report on average click rates across different industries. So that's a great one that I highly recommend you can use. Internally, we do that. Plus, we have internal kind of benchmarks and numbers that we can reference based off the many, many years of campaigns and accounts that we've managed. And the number one thing that I see as sort of a mistake that brands tend to make is looking at open rates, and they go, my open rate's at 30% or 40%, but my competitor is telling me that they're getting a 60% open rate. But often that's not it's not a good indication of success.
Yeah.
The opens are often diluted with Apple Mail privacy
Yeah.
opens, which doesn't give you a true number. But when you look at click rates, that tells you the full picture. That's hard to dispute. That's a number that you cannot really contest against. And if you're sitting on an average of like 0.5% click rates, you're probably in a bit of a trouble. You're probably in a situation where you have a lot of room for improvement, because the average click rate that you want to see with campaigns should be at least 1% to 1.5% at a bare minimum.
And how do you balance that
Depending on the
with,
campaigns.
because obviously you could, I suspect there's things you can do within building an email that not manipulate, but it's going to drive higher clicks, but not necessarily clicks with commercial intent. How do you kind of balance that? Obviously something's getting no clicks, very difficult to make sales off of it, but equally
Yeah.
trying to balance pushing quality traffic to a website to actually go on to likely make a purchase.
100%. That's a great question. So there are two kind of almost like a counterbalancing metric, if you will, right? So that's clicks, and you want to place orders or kind of goals and outcomes, right? In the direct to consumer world, that's just a direct place order. In the B2B world, that might be an appointment, right? So booked rate, place order rate, and click rates, they come hand in hand. So if you have a high click rate for a certain campaign, but a low place order rate or low conversion, you might want to consider what you're priming that audience for in that campaign. And is that intended? In some cases, yes, it's totally okay, right? In some cases, it's really a completely different life cycle stage that you're targeting. For example, if it's a blog post, email that you're featuring, and we do a lot of those, and they tend to generate a good amount of clicks. On average, 3 to 4% is what you can see on the high end, versus like 0.5% with a lot of brands. So you automatically seeing like 6, 7, 8 times more click-throughs to your website via that one email campaign.
Yeah.
But the intent is way lower. And in some cases, that's totally okay, because that's the full intent of that campaign, which is to generate attention and to get people onto the website, and move them along that consideration cycle. But in some cases, it's a matter of turning that opportunity into something else that moves them further down the road. In the D2C world, that's fairly straightforward. It's a transaction online.
Yeah.
In the B2B world, that might be a little bit different. It might be, hey, if you like this blog post, you might like this white paper or this resource. And to do that, you have to kind of jump through a different hoop, right?
Yeah.
Fill out this form with all these details that will allow us to kind of speak with you a lot more efficiently. So there's a kind of time and intent to every campaign.
Yeah, fair. And then, like, I presume that email is the biggest lever, or one of the biggest levers that you have to pull in this space, right?
Yep.
I guess, like, first of all, is that true? And then how do you go about working out what an appropriate strategy is? Like, when are you working in SMS campaigns? When are you staying well clear of them? And yeah, I guess, like, just talk about, I guess, the tools you have in the toolkit at your disposal, and when you kind of use each of them.
It is it's really market dependent. With SMS, it's a little bit trickier. You don't have a universal policy or rule that comes with SMS. It's a little bit more intimate and personal. So every country is going to be a little bit different. Like in Singapore, when I receive a text from a number that I have not opted in for, it literally says likely scam. And that's not a that's not a good thing to see,
Mm.
when you're a brand. With the US, however, email dominant, and for similar reasons, you know, has probably one of the highest kind of daily active users in terms of platforms out there. But SMS is increasingly more and more important for various reasons. But SMS is a highly, highly engaging channel that is both easy to set up, easy to maintain and use. So your kind of time to value and time to ROI is really, really short as a brand. And assuming that you don't have unlimited marketing resources and manpower,
Mm.
that's something that you care for. But it is important to have SMS and email in sync so that so that they run in harmony along with all of your marketing channels, right? We have a little spreadsheet that we put together that it's nothing complicated, but it's really something that brands should be doing, but most of them are not because they operate kind of in silos. You want your email and SMS to be coordinated in sync so that when you run an email campaign, you're pairing that up with an SMS reminder, or you're pairing that up based off a behavioral trigger. For example, if someone has clicked on an email campaign and they have not purchased in the last 12 hours, send this SMS at 8 a.m.,
Mm.
right? That sort of coordination needs to take place. If not, it becomes a really spammy and annoying channel that people just do not want to deal with, and it's gonna be counter effective.
And I guess like SMS is so personal, isn't it? Like it is a more personal channel than email. And like, do you find that if advertisers are not abusing, but are kind of hitting a little bit too hard by SMS, that'll have an impact on email marketing success and overall campaign success? Like, how do you find that playing out?
Absolutely, it's a channel that you do not want to abuse. It is it's one of those channels that once you betray trust, you're not gonna get it back again.
Mm.
Once you unsubscribe from it, from SMS, you typically don't see people coming back again. Because it's so intimate, right? It's like
Mm.
it's a platform where you text your friends and family, and if an advertiser kind of pops up, you you'd have to earn their trust.
Mm.
Um, so the way to do that, in a smart way, is one of two things. One, personalize. So as much as possible, make sure that the content that you're putting out are relevant to the recipient. The second thing is to time it correctly. There are a few things that you can do. Um, Timing it such that uh, there are features in most SMS platforms. You'd have a feature that prevents campaigns from going out during quiet hours, right? So when people are asleep, when they're off work or whatever, that just doesn't go out. There's also timing based on behaviors and triggers. With a lot of platforms like likes of Klaviyo, you could set up uh, a trigger based on activity on email or on site. And that's really cool, right? So if
Yeah.
they have recently been active on website in the past, say 6 hours or 2 hours,
And haven't
you could
checked
have an
out.
SMS campaign or automation go out that targets that demographic specifically.
Can we talk a little bit about, I'm sure you get this question all the time, and I'm sure the answer is it depends, but if you could just talk a little bit about how you approach frequency, both of email and text. And I think if we can just lean in heavily here into the space you play in that kind of D2C, e-commerce kind of space, because I think how my observation would be that e-commerce brands probably have different considerations around frequency of email compared to slower moving B2B offline kind of purchases. I kind of find frequency there quite
Mm,
different. But
yeah.
if we just talk about how you approach it, when is enough enough? When is it too little? What kind of works in a kind of faster moving D2C kind of environment?
Yep. There are a few limiting factors, right? There's the first most common limiting factor is going to be marketing resources, right? Even if you're able to send emails on a daily basis, you may not want to do that for, resourcing reasons. It may be really difficult unless you're working with an agency with, scalable resources. It's going to be really tough to scale up. And the second limiting factor is kind of the law of diminishing returns. And you're going to hit a point where sending more emails aren't necessarily going to result in better outcomes. And, depending on what that outcome looks like in our world and D2C, it's going to be place orders. Um, you're going to hit a ceiling, essentially. And with that ceiling comes negative consequences, right?
Mm.
Which is fatigue, which would be unsubscribes, disengagement, or worst case scenario, spam complaints.
Yeah.
The number one indicator that I would keep an eye out for would be click rates, right? Going back to fundamentals again,
Mm.
right? If you see click rates remaining steady and right about the same, while sending more and more emails, right? You can do an incremental thing, starting with maybe 2 emails a week to 3 emails a week to 4. And if you see click rates remaining steady, that's a good sign, which
Mm.
means that you're increasing the absolute number of clicks going to your site.
Because it is a good proxy for quality, isn't it? Like,
It is
as
a,
opposed
it's a
to your
great
point,
proxy
the
for
idea of
quality.
open rates and issues now with platforms actually seeing whether something has been opened.
Exactly. Yeah.
An unsubscribe click, it's any engagement, right?
Yep. Precisely. So that's a best indicator for that. And before dumping more resources and paying your agency more, you might want to run a test first, which is incidentally how we approach projects as well with our retainers and our clients. Start small. Start with the kind of minimum viable kind of MVP and what the result looks like, and then incrementally scale that up. And with that approach, I find a lot more sustainable and a lot higher in confidence, which is most likely the most going to be most efficient and effective approach.
What do you see with your clients? Like at the extreme end, what would be the most frequent email send from one of your clients? And then maybe an example of one that's kind of less frequent because it's a
Yeah,
bigger purchase or it's less of a repeat kind of purchase. But both
it's
of them doing
seasonal.
practice. Yeah. Like what would be two extreme ends?
It will be seasonal. So in peak seasons like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, like out in the US or Click Frenzy in Australia, we could be sending for a single brand up to 45 to 60 emails a month, right? So that's like 2 to 3 emails a day.
Mm.
And it's done very intentionally across multiple segments. So although we're building out like 45, 50, 60 emails or even more a month, a single consumer, a single subscriber isn't going to be receiving 60 emails
Yeah.
in that one month. It's going to be a segmented kind of approach. So what's most likely going to happen is a single subscriber might be receiving maybe 10, 15 to 20 emails a month.
Yeah.
On the low end, at the very, very kind of bare minimum, I'd still strongly recommend a once a week cadence just to stay top of mind, just to, just as an additional kind of touch point to every other marketing channels that's active at the moment. You kind of want to have that relationship, that engagement retained, because you never really want to stop emailing completely. It's unlike most other channels, which is emails depreciate over time. It deteriorates over time. On average, 25% of your lists are going to go unengaged in any given year, on average. So if you're not engaging actively with your database, with your prospects and subscribers and customers, that 25% number is going to be way higher.
It's really, really interesting. Before we started recording, you were kind of talking just about what it's like to be a consumer these days in terms of email, and just it's such a mature channel, but the frequency with which people are receiving emails is higher than ever before. Maybe if we could just kind of dig into that a little bit more, and how brands can kind of, I guess, be empathetic toward that, and what brands need to be doing.
100%. It is we sit in a time where emails become the default official and unofficial communication mode professionally in most developed worlds that we live in. The problem with that is the widespread use of email means that you have massive volume of daily active users on the channel, but you're also getting inundated with all kinds of marketing tools. For example, the emailing tool that I use personally in my personal inbox is a tool called Superhuman. It is it's almost like a wrapper on top of a Gmail, right? And my other inboxes. And it uses AI to classify what's important to me. Which means that not only are marketing emails going to be siphoned out and filtered to my others inbox, emails that would have landed in my primary tab in Gmail are also going to end up in the others inbox because of my preferences and how I can interact with emails. Which means that engagement rates are only going to go further and further kind of lower, because you're competing with a higher volume of kind of competition, with consumers being way more educated and way more informed on how they would like to kind of engage with emails as a platform, which means the power is back in the consumer's hands. So there are two things that, in my opinion, brands can do to adapt to this. One, personalize heavily, make sure that every interaction and every experience that you're offering to a consumer is relevant and targeted as much as possible. And two, rely closer, use data a lot more heavily in terms of making your decisions. Gone are the days where, oh, this email looks great, let me do that for my brand. Nah, stick to what works and stick to what the data tells you. And most email platforms allow that to happen and allow you to do that fairly easily. So there's no reason not to.
Can we unpack personalization? It's such a buzzword, right? It kind of has been for a long time. And it is kind of, I think a lot of marketers see kind of AI, personalization, data, all kind of wrapped up in the one space. And that seems to be the future promise of AI, right? Which is kind of this hyper-targeted marketing communications, not just email, across all channels, which require brands to have great data, maintain great data, because if you don't have that, then it's very hard to personalize. But like, what does it mean in your space? Like, and just, I think it'd be good to share stories, like not necessarily the names of the brand, but the types of things that some of the more sophisticated clients you're working with are doing by way of personalization.
Yeah, absolutely. So
like, I personally found it really interesting when you were talking about abandoned cart being kind of complemented with text messages, at a time of day when that person has woken up. Look, that's interesting stuff, right? So yeah,
absolutely. So personalization is all about allowing you to send the right message to the right person at the right time, right? Like we kind of spoke about with lifecycle marketing. And in order to do that, you need data that is quality and highly specific. And there are a couple layers of data that you can kind of work with, right? There's zero-party data, there's first-party data, and there's also second and third-party data. With zero-party data, that's information that you're collecting directly from your customers and subscribers. And the way to do that is with surveys, with sign-up forms, with pop-ups, quizzes. The more you get to know your audience, and this is why, these pop-ups and quizzes are so important. It's not just for fun. It allows you to build a customer profile that's highly specific so that when you go out building out campaigns, you can go deep into creating not just a sales email, but a sales email featuring shoes for people who are highly interested in shoes. You could also create that same sales kind of email featuring maybe handbags and targeting people who are highly interested in handbags versus a blanket all-in-one, hey, buy shoes and bags here at 15% off. That's going to be way more efficient and way more impactful because it's speaking directly to the interests and preferences of your kind of set subscribers and users. The second type of data they can work with, first-party data, is it's getting more and more limited given kind of privacy acts and laws, but it's still available, right? Especially when it comes to the behaviors of consumers in your owned channels. And that means behaviors on app, if that's a platform that a channel that you have as a business, or behavior on email, and understanding the types of emails that people engage with, the types of links and products that people are clicking into, gives you a proxy indication of what interests them. And by extension, you could draw conclusions from that and create personalized campaigns that target those interest groups. And then finally, this is where kind of AI comes in, which I'm personally really excited about. Is predictive interests and predictive demographic categories.
Can we unpack that a little bit?
Sure. A very rudimentary kind of version of that is predicted genders, right? And that's, I believe, available in Klaviyo. It is available in Klaviyo, and I think it's only going to get better and better over time. But based off first name and last name, there is an engine in Klaviyo without even kind of asking for kind of surveys and getting people to fill out forms. There is a predicted engine that gives you a kind of spits out a segment of potentially male, potentially female, potentially unknown, and which is a little bit of a touchy subject right now, but I still think it's a good kind of indication of how where AI can move towards. And what I'm really excited to see is a company that could take that to the next level, and based off certain behaviors, patterns, names, and kind of slew of information about a customer kind of profile, and taking that and building specific segments of interest groups and buying patterns and behaviors that is predicted based off
That's really cool.
that information, which some tools are able to do right now. Such as I believe Braze AI has one, BRAZE, has a similar kind of feature. And I believe Klaviyo is also developing something of this kind of similar nature as well with AI segmentation. But I still think that it's fairly rudimentary right now. But at the pace of how AI is developing, I wouldn't be surprised if something completely blows our minds come out in the next few months.
And what like obviously all of that personalization requires you to have the data, but to also have the technology, which allows kind of the interplay between the two. You mentioned Klaviyo. I think you Klaviyo partner. I imagine you do a lot of work in the platform. What other tools are out there which brands like should be using or could be using, like in terms of putting a tech stack together that's actually going to allow them to take advantage of a lot of these concepts?
Yep, 100%. So Klaviyo is a great one if you're a kind of pure play e-commerce business. It is hands down one of the best, easiest to use, and most effective tools out there for not just email but SMS, as well as customer uh, customer relationships as a whole. They also have an inbuilt CDP that's pretty cool, customer data platform that allows us to do a lot of things that we discuss today. If you have a retail storefront and an e-commerce storefront and B2B, and if you're omni-channel, essentially, you may want to look beyond, and you may want to look at a kind of enterprise grade tool like Braze, for instance, or eCommerce Design. I personally, I've kind of tinkered around with most of these platforms, but I'm not the most familiar directly, and I'll highly recommend running demos with each of them. The challenge with doing that is, and I've been through this with multiple clients, is that all of these tools are very similar on paper and very, very similar on a feature set. There's always like an inflation of feature war where everyone kind of goes into parity. So feature parity. But when it comes to usability, that's something that I feel is key, because at the end of the day, it's about how a tool is used versus what the tool can offer. If the tool is, incredible, but terrible to navigate and impossible to fully get to full utilization without a developer and a technical specialist and this and that, Salesforce, it will be really difficult to unlock the true potential of the channels. So that's something to think about.
It's good feedback. You mentioned it earlier on in the session, direct mail. I'd just love to hear what you're doing in that space for clients and how it's working. I think it's I read an interesting. I mean, it's a lot of performance marketers in a digital sense came out of the direct mail space, right? Kind of through that kind of noughties period, particularly out of America, because it has such a strong pedigree of direct mail. You see there's a lot of thought leaders in the space, a lot of agencies that have done really good stuff came out of that space. And I definitely hear of good stuff happening now, because I think, marketing, when the industry is zigging and you zag, that you stand out, right? So I think there's some kind of option there. So I'd love to hear what's working, and is it in Australia as well, America?
Yeah, zagging with a twist. Zagging with a twist.
Love that.
The difference here is that now with data and the availability of tools at our disposal, like the likes of Klaviyo, it makes for personalizing direct mail really easy, which prior to this, I doubt it was all that simple. In the past, it was a game of numbers, right? Really just mass high volume sends. And even if you're converting at a 0.001%, if you're sending millions and millions of postcards every single month, you're still going to make an ROI. The challenge now is with emails being so crowded as a space, postcards and direct mail become a lot more interesting. And shout out to our partners at Postpilot. We use Postpilot for a lot of the direct mails. And they have an integration with Klaviyo that automatically kind of pulls information from Klaviyo, creating segments of lists of customers that we can, at a single click, send a specific campaign, postcard campaign to. However, costs can be prohibitive, right? It costs over $1 on average each.
Singaporean dollar?
USD.
USD. And do they
per postcard, right?
Do they post into Australia or just into North America?
I believe it's that. I'm not sure. I believe it's a US. It's US only at the moment. But I'm not sure if they have plans on expanding into Oz.
Yeah,
I'm sure they will. They're growing very quickly. And the interesting thing about direct mail is that even though it's so expensive, um, at the end of the day, when you're targeting the right segments, it's still going to be a profitable kind of outcome. In our case, we're using it a lot for win back campaigns um, and cart abandonment campaigns. So for acquisition, specifically for higher ticket items. And with win backs, it is highly effective for a few reasons. One, you have lost that customer. You have lost that's a churn. And if you're able to reactivate a lost customer, it is invaluable, right? Super valuable. So the objective there is to at least, at the very least, break even with a campaign like that with winback. But in the tests that we've ran, it's been very surprising. Our ROIs on average double digit, and it's been nice to see.
It just feels logical, doesn't it? It's if you've got that CDP in Klaviyo, you know where everyone's at, right? People that have previously purchased over a certain amount, people that haven't purchased for a certain period, or people that loaded a product into their cart but didn't complete. There's going to be different levers you can pull different times of the year to take advantage of that, right? Put an offer in front of them, and you're going to get cut through that you simply won't get through email.
So it all starts with having the right, setup and right data. So having the right tools, super important. The cool thing about having the right tools in place is that once you have it, you don't think about it anymore. But if you have the wrong tools in place, you're always thinking about tooling and resourcing, because it's a pain, right?
Your observation.
So that's the one thing that you want to get rid of, get right off the gate.
I want to shift the conversation just quickly to Australia. So, I know a good chunk of your customer base has always been in Australia. You've now got an office in Australia. Can we just talk about your observations of the Australian e-commerce market? How are we different to markets like the US and Asia and whatever else?
I think this will be really interesting for Aussie businesses trying to venture out of Australia, especially into the US. The dynamics are really different. In the US, you're going to see CPC going way higher, super competitive. In most cases, right? In some cases, it's actually lower, but the positioning of the business and the positioning of offers is going to be very different as well. In Australia, there is at least from what I've observed, there's a heavier emphasis on social proof and to some degree relationships more than anything. In the US, it's more technical. It's more you're gonna go heavier on the authority and credibility kind of angle versus social proof. That comes on a kind of in a later stage of the buying cycle. But that's what activates interest and activates behavior, kind of just action to begin with. So that's just an observation on a high level. But I'm curious what you see. What do you think, James?
Putting it back on me. I love that, Josh.
Yeah, I gotta learn too.
You've got a pod. Yeah, you've done a good job playing guest today. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would say we do less work outside of the Australian market than you do. Like, a lot of our clients are global brands that are engaging us to run their digital within Australia, or Australian brands operating within Australia and New Zealand. We definitely have probably, 25, 30% of our clients where we are running campaigns into Europe, North America kind of thing. I kind of feel, exactly what you said, which is the American market is hyper competitive. If you go in with what would be quite a large budget into Australia, you go into the US with it and it will just be eaten alive in a very short space of time. So you want to pick your target market, your test markets, and get stuff operating well, and then kind of growing it out. think from like a language viewpoint, I thought that was really interesting how you talked about social proof versus kind of authority and credibility. Um, Definitely observe that particularly in like a B2B context in the Australian market, it's less preachy and you're less all about yourself and strong language and kind of bang it
Yep.
from a chest.
Yeah.
In America, I think that stuff resonates better. I think in Australia, it's almost that tall poppy syndrome where Australians don't like big noting themselves and probably don't like the idea of businesses doing the same. So I think you're toning your language down. I've never thought of it from a social proof perspective, but I think that would be aligned with that, which is I'm not going to speak about myself. I'll let someone else do it for me.
Yeah.
I think kind of makes sense. Um, and then from a landscape viewpoint, like in many ways, we're very, very similar, right? To Canada and
Yeah.
UK and the US. I think Google has the highest penetration it has in the world in Australia and New Zealand. I think it runs at like 95% of searches each day
Mm.
in Google. In America, you kind of have Bing probably 15%, maybe a little bit more than that. But like from a social viewpoint, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, they're all kind of running it's a very similar mix, right?
Yeah.
In the kind of English speaking world. But I think then if you look at clients wanting to market into Asia, different markets within Asia are just totally different, right? Like how Vietnam operates to China, to Singapore.
Heavily,
You kind of have to treat each of them as their own separate,
Yeah.
totally separate kind of approach to digital, I think. Yeah, that'd be my kind of observation on it.
Yeah, 100%. And if anyone listening is trying to break into the US, my kind of just what I've observed, having worked with Aussie brands breaking into US, is like you said, like pick one or two markets that you want to go deep in,
Yeah.
and get specific, like pick a specific state that you want to
Yeah.
go deep into, and understand what drives behavior in that, in that state.
100%. It's good.
Yeah.
But we're getting close to time. I think for like if you are running an e-com business in the country and what Josh has spoken about is of interest, feel free to reach out to Josh, have a chat. Kind of Chronos Agencies, the website, punch it into Google, it will come up. I end every pod with the question of what's the best piece of career advice that you'd give to an in-house marketer. So Josh, I asked the question of you. Feel free to, take a pause to think about this career or life-altering advice that you're about to give.
Oh, interesting. All right. This is it's an advice that I took to heart as well, to myself. The quality of questions you ask determine the quality of answers you get, and also the quality of life you have. So I have a thing where I collect good questions, fun questions that and we're both in EO, right? So James, when I meet a fellow EOer, I always kind of pull out one or two of these interesting questions to ask, but it doesn't always work well for casual chats when you go out guns a-blazing. There's something so vulnerable. Not always the best idea, but it's always a good idea. It's always a good. These are always good questions to ask ourselves. A good example might be, what's one advice or one decision that I am holding back from giving myself or making? That's a good one. Or this one comes from Tim Ferriss. What would it look like if this was easy? And that's a great one, because as marketers, we often fall in the trap of just complexity and thinking about, if we do this and that, data, yada, yada, yada. But sometimes the right answer is often a simple and easy one.
I knew you'd give a great answer to that question. I just knew it.
Was that good?
Yeah, it's a great one. You're very wise. I'm not going to embarrass Josh by revealing his true age, but I always learn a lot from you. We're at I'm not going to name names, but we're at a session together and met up the next day, and I asked you a question about what you thought of it, and your response kind of floored me. I think you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you don't.
Was it?
Talk about it up there. We can't talk in specifics, but There's
of course.
a lot of wisdom there, and I knew you'd give me a good answer on that one. I think it's a great one for us to all think about. Josh, thanks so much for spending time on the pod, and hope to have you back one day.
Love it. Thank you. Thanks for your time.